Ladies and gentlemen, the most dangerous man in the world is not the one with the gun. He is the one who speaks the truth when lies are law. Today, I speak to you in defiance of silence, because there are truths too powerful to be broadcast, and too threatening to remain online. What you are about to hear may not survive the algorithm, but it will survive in your conscience, so listen closely before they delete it. They said we were free, but our currencies are printed in foreign capitals, our leaders are trained in foreign ideologies, our youth are brainwashed by foreign media, we raise their flags, we speak their tongues, and we trade our dignity for their donations. This is not independence, this is a digital prison, a global plantation, and Ibrahim Traore dared to say it. He exposed the illusion that what we call peace is managed chaos, that what we call aid is silent theft, that what we call democracy is a mask for domination. And for speaking this truth, they labeled him extreme. But the real extremism is the silence of the so-called educated, the comfort of the compromised, and the betrayal of those who know the truth but whisper it behind curtains. They told us that freedom was won. They told us that the struggle was over, that the chains had been broken, and the flags had been raised in victory, but they lied. They did not remove the chains, they only changed their shape. The chains of iron have become chains of policy. The whip has been replaced by debt. The colonizer no longer stands on the soil with a gun. He sits in boardrooms controlling your economy, your media, your education, and your future. And the most dangerous truth today is not that we are still being controlled. It is that we are being controlled and they make it look like freedom. But the people are waking up. And because we are waking up, they are panicking. They are not only trying to silence the voices, they are now trying to erase them. They want you distracted by noise while they delete the truth. They want you laughing at empty entertainment while they rewrite your history. They want you obsessed with celebrity and gossip while they dismantle your sovereignty. You see, truth is not just inconvenient, it is dangerous to those who built their kingdoms on lies. That is why they delete it. That is why they hide it. That is why those who speak it are labeled extreme, radical, unstable. But the real instability is the system that starves millions while feeding imperialism. The real extremism is a world order where the wealth of one continent depends on the misery of another. The real crime is silence in the face of injustice dressed in diplomacy. Ibrahim Traore did not whisper, he roared. He said what every conscious mind has long known but feared to speak, that we are still occupied, not by soldiers but by systems. And that occupation is not only on our land, it is in our minds, in our textbooks, in our trade, in our technology. When you open your eyes to it, you begin to see the pattern. The countries richest in resources are the poorest in freedom. The nations most blessed with youth are cursed with manipulated leadership. The voices that speak truth are silenced before they can echo, because the system does not fear resistance, it fears awareness. Because awareness cannot be bought, and when people begin to see clearly, they stop obeying quietly. The truth is being deleted not because it is false, but because it is working. It is waking people up. It is connecting the dots. It is sparking the fires that foreign powers spent decades extinguishing. They can't control it, so they call it dangerous. They can't counter it, so they call it misinformation. But the greatest misinformation is the narrative that Africa must remain poor to be helped, that Africa must be passive to be accepted, that Africa must depend to be respected. No, what they really fear is an Africa that thinks, an Africa that questions, an Africa that rises. And Traore's message is not simply political, it is spiritual. It is a return to ownership, to self-worth, to unapologetic dignity. The moment you begin to speak about the real reasons behind economic slavery, digital surveillance, false partnerships, and institutional corruption, you become a target, not because you are wrong, but because you are right. And today, truth has become the most dangerous weapon of all. That is why they do not wait for you to go viral. They strike early, they bury your words, they cut your reach, they censor your soul. But they forget something very important. Truth cannot be deleted from the hearts of the awakened. Once it is seen, it cannot be unseen. Once it is heard, it echoes, and once it is felt, it spreads like fire across dry grass. This is why this message matters, not because it is mine, not because it is new, but because it is real. It is rooted in the very blood of those who fought before us. It is carved into the memory of every village betrayed by false promises. It is encoded into every youth who knows deep inside that something is wrong, even if they can't yet name it. This is the message that refuses to die. It is the message that terrifies the system. It is the message that connects us across language, across borders, across generations. So understand this. The reason they are trying to delete this truth is because they know its power. They know that one honest voice can ripple through millions. They know that one awakened mind can break a cycle of mental slavery. They know that one leader who cannot be bought is more dangerous than 1,000 soldiers. And they know that when people listen, not with their ears but with their conscience, everything begins to change. They told us colonization ended the day the flag was lowered and our anthem began to play. They told us the white man went home, that we were now in control, that our destiny belonged to us. But if you look closely, you will see the master never left. He simply changed clothes. He replaced the uniform with a suit, the whip with a briefcase, the gun with a bank loan. And instead of occupying our land with soldiers, he began occupying our future with contracts, debts, and manipulated policies. This is the truth they don't want you to hear. This is the truth they want deleted. Because if you ever truly understood it, if you ever truly saw it, the entire illusion of independence would collapse like a house of cards. The new colonization does not carry a flag, it carries a logo. It comes in the form of corporations, media empires, peacekeeping missions, and international aid agencies. It no longer speaks through the barrel of a gun, but through the comfort of your television screen and the pages of your schoolbooks. It does not tell you that you are inferior. It teaches you to imitate others so you never remember who you are. It tells you that progress means becoming more like them, and failure means being too much like yourself. And so, slowly, without resistance, we were convinced to abandon our ways, forget our languages, undermine our systems, and adopt a borrowed dream. We were told to measure success in foreign currencies, foreign education, and foreign praise. That is not development. That is dependency wearing makeup. Look at the economies of Africa today. Rich in minerals but poor in ownership. Rich in talent but poor in opportunities. Rich in potential but poor in power. We produce what we do not consume, and we consume what we do not produce. Our gold is taken, our oil is exported, our youth are recruited into wars we did not start, and our leaders are trained to serve interests that do not include us. They make us believe that aid is generosity when in fact it is a leash. They convince us that foreign troops are for our protection when they are positioned to protect the same pipelines that rob our land. This is not theory. This is not exaggeration. This is the lived experience of a continent deliberately kept on its knees, and when Ibrahim Traore stood up, they called him reckless. But what is reckless? Is it not allowing your people to starve while foreign companies grow fat off your resources? What is reckless? Is it not watching your youth drown in the Mediterranean Sea while your leaders attend summits that decide nothing? What is reckless? Is it not borrowing money from the very nations who looted you for centuries? No, my friends, the real recklessness is pretending this system will change on its own. The real madness is believing that those who profit from your weakness will ever teach you how to be strong. The reason they fear this message is because it reveals the blueprint of their deception. It unmasks their democracy as manipulation, their partnership as parasitism, and their peace as the silence of the oppressed. They use words like stability, cooperation, and modernization. But behind those words is a machine that extracts your dignity while feeding you dependency. And every time you question it, they call you radical. But I ask you, since when did defending your birthright become radical? Since when did demanding justice become rebellion? Since when did self-respect become a threat? Traor's defiance is not chaos, it is clarity. He did not wake up and decide to fight the West. He woke up and refused to let his people be fooled any longer. And in doing so, he reignited something that was buried under decades of psychological warfare, a sense of ownership. Ownership of decisions, ownership of destiny, ownership of resources, ownership of truth, because the new colonization thrives in confusion. It thrives in imitation. It thrives in our inability to think for ourselves. But once you reclaim your mind, you begin to reclaim everything else. They want you to believe that the world cannot function without their help, but the truth is, they cannot survive without our silence. They cannot survive without our minerals, our labor, our consumption, and our submission. Once we begin to think for ourselves, they lose the power to define us. Once we unite economically, culturally, politically, and spiritually, their control begins to wither. And that is why this message must be heard. That is why they will try to delete it. Because it does not beg. It does not ask politely. It demands a new Africa, governed by its own values, rooted in its own people, free from the grip of modern colonizers in suits and screens. So if you are listening to this, understand, it is not just a message, it is a mirror that shows you the truth they tried to bury. And once you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. Once you've heard it, you cannot unhear it. Once you've felt it, you must respond, because freedom delayed is freedom denied, and the system will not release you until you stop asking and start acting. They speak of threats, nuclear weapons, global terrorism, cyber attacks. But the greatest threat to the colonial system is not found in weapons or wars. The greatest threat to the imperial order is the African youth who dares to think. A young African who begins to question why his continent is the richest in resources yet poorest in dignity. A young African who begins to see through the illusions sold on screens, in textbooks, and in treaties. A young African who no longer bows to leaders placed on thrones by foreign hands. That youth, my brothers and sisters, is what they fear most. Because once the African youth awakens, the system begins to tremble. They have spent decades numbing the minds of our youth. They gave us entertainment instead of education, consumerism instead of consciousness, imitation instead of identity. They flooded our schools with foreign heroes and erased our own. They rebranded our history as shame, our languages as primitive, our traditions as backward. They told us to dream like them, dress like them, speak like them, and behave like them, until we became strangers to ourselves. And yet, even under this mental assault, the spirit of resistance still burns in our youth. That flame is not gone, it has only been buried, and now, as the world changes, that flame is rising. When Ibrahim Traore stood before the world with clarity and conviction, it was not just a speech, it was a signal to every young man and woman that the time of confusion is over, the time of watching is over. The time of silence is over, because you, the African youth, are not the future. You are the present. You are the weapon they did not expect, not because of violence, but because of vision, not because of muscle, but because of mind. Not because of rebellion, but because of reason. You see, once you start thinking critically, you become immune to the lies. Once you understand the roots of your condition, you stop accepting the leaves as your destiny. They do not fear an armed revolution. They fear a mental revolution, because a liberated mind cannot be bought, cannot be bribed, cannot be broken. A liberated mind does not worship oppressors. A liberated mind does not wait for Western validation. A liberated mind does not accept that the best a young African can be is a worker in someone else's system. A liberated mind builds its own. That is why the awakening of youth is the most urgent matter of our time. Because for too long, Africa's energy has been stolen and exported, not just in minerals, but in mines. They take your best students, give them scholarships, and teach them how to manage systems that are designed to keep their people poor. They praise you for your intelligence, only to place you in a structure where that intelligence serves their goals. And in return, you are rewarded with titles, with conferences, with visibility, but never with power. Because they know, if you ever stop playing their game, if you ever start designing your own, their empire begins to crumble. You are not dangerous because of your skin. You are dangerous because of your potential. And once that potential becomes conscious, organized, and unapologetic, then change is not just possible, it is inevitable. This is why they attack any leader who empowers the youth. Because when the youth are awake, they stop being tools. They become architects, they stop being beggars, they become builders, they stop asking for permission, they start claiming their inheritance. They begin to connect across borders, across languages, across tribes, because they realize their enemy is not their neighbor. It is the structure that was built to keep them divided and weak. The youth become one voice, one mission, one force that cannot be silenced. You must understand, my brothers and sisters, that your value is not defined by job offers from abroad or visas in foreign passports. Your value is in your mind, in your roots, in your ability to think without fear. It is in your ability to look at injustice and say no more. It is in your courage to break the scripts and write a new story, not just for yourself, but for your people. And when you rise, not in hate but in awareness, not in rage but in vision, not in protest but in purpose, you become the very thing the oppressors cannot control. In times of injustice, silence is not peace, it is betrayal. In the face of oppression, neutrality is not wisdom, it is cowardice. And in the struggle for liberation, silence is no longer an option. It is complicity. For too long, we have been taught that to be civil is to be quiet, that to be mature is to be passive, that to be educated is to obey. But silence has become a disease that spreads in our schools, our parliaments, our homes, and our hearts. It is the silence of those who know the truth but refuse to speak it. It is the silence of those who see corruption and look away. It is the silence of those who watch their people suffer while hiding behind positions, titles, and fear. That silence is louder than any gunshot, because that silence allows the enemy to advance unchecked. When injustice becomes normal, when exploitation is disguised as cooperation, and when dependency is sold as development, then silence is no longer a personal choice. It is a political position, and it is the position of surrender. Those who remain silent in the face of injustice are not neutral. They are on the side of the oppressor, because the system does not survive through force alone. It survives through silence. It survives when good people say nothing. It survives when the educated choose comfort over courage. It survives when the gifted decide that self-preservation is more important than people's liberation. But there comes a time when history demands that we speak, not with hesitation, not with permission, but with purpose. When Ibrahim Traore rose, he did not speak because it was safe. He spoke because it was necessary. He did not act because the world approved. He acted because his conscience could no longer be silent. He understood that the cost of truth is high, but the cost of silence is far greater, because silence allows suffering to continue. Silence allows foreign interests to dominate. Silence allows generations to believe that submission is survival. And that lie is the most dangerous weapon of all. It is what keeps the powerful comfortable and the poor hopeless. But when the silence is broken, even by one voice, the entire system begins to shake. We must understand that speaking out is not a matter of personality. It is a matter of principle. It is not a matter of anger. It is a matter of justice. There are those who say, wait, be patient, work behind the scenes. But history shows us that behind the scenes is where betrayal is negotiated. It is where deals are made that sell our minerals, mortgage our futures, and surrender our sovereignty. The struggle for truth does not belong behind curtains. It belongs in the streets, in the classrooms, in the parliaments, in the pulpits, and in the hearts of every man and woman who still believes that Africa is not a problem to be managed, but a people to be respected. You do not have to be in government to speak. You do not have to be on a stage to act. You do not have to be famous to resist. Every voice matters. Every act of courage counts. And every time you choose to stay silent when you should speak, you strengthen the system that profits from your silence. The enemy counts on your fear. The enemy counts on your fatigue. The enemy counts on your silence. But when you stand up, when you speak out, when you say enough, then the chains begin to loosen, because the truth, once spoken, cannot be recalled. And once it spreads, it cannot be stopped. This moment is not for the comfortable. It is not for the cautious. It is not for those who wish to sit at the table of power without questioning how that table was built. This moment belongs to those who are willing to speak even if they stand alone, those who are willing to lose titles to gain truth, those who are willing to be hated for being honest, rather than loved for being silent. This is the generation that must choose. Do we whisper and survive in submission, or do we roar and rise in resistance? They have tried to convince us that silence is noble, that it protects us. But silence has not protected our children from poverty. Silence has not protected our nations from debt. Silence has not protected our lands from being sold, our leaders from being controlled, our futures from being stolen. Silence has only protected the system. And so today I declare that silence is no longer our strategy. Truth is our weapon. Conscience is our compass. And courage is our duty.